Diving on into NFL Week 6. Wow. We are just rolling along right now through the NFL season, and Erik is here as he is with us each and every week to talk about all of the games. Since we're recording a little earlier this week, we can talk about the Thursday night game as well. So this is Wednesday, just keep in mind. So if anything happens over the next couple days, we will talk about it on Sunday morning at 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern time on the Better Than Vegas show. That's Fourth and Inches. All that great Better Than Vegas content is sponsored by Betfred Sportsbook. Great sportsbook. We're looking at the betting lines from Betfred Sportsbook right now. Erik, buddy, heading into week 6 right now. How you doing?
You know what? I'm doing good. I'm a little sad though, because it's flying. You know what I mean? Like, we do all this work to get ready for this part.
I know. It's like a third of the way done right now.
Oh, Biden season's already over, planning for the draft next year. I mean, Panthers looking to blow it up. Like,
yeah,
it's crazy. It's gonna be interesting to real quick before we start. It's gonna be interesting to see what the Panthers do.
Yes.
They got like the pass rusher whose name I'm spacing on, obviously McCaffrey, Robbie Anderson,
Chin.
Yeah.
There's some good players on the defensive side that are like young with upside.
DJ Moore, Terrence Marshall. They got Chanel. They got some players. But my 2 cents on them is this: you got players. You're gonna have, this draft class is gonna be loaded with QB talent. Get an offensive-minded coach and draft one of these young guys, and kind of look to do what the Jaguars have done. That's what I would do if I was them. I wouldn't blow it up quite yet.
So we'll talk about the Panthers in just a few moments. But first, let's talk about the Thursday night game. Erik, we're going to do a little space from now on Thursdays at 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. Just quick, 15, 20 minutes or so. Talk about the Thursday night game, give out some plays, and any up-to-date last-minute stuff. So if anyone else wants to join us on Thursdays for that, Erik will put out that Twitter space each and every Thursday. Let's talk Commanders and the Bears. How about this? The NFC East is the only team is the only division with 34, with 3 4-win teams. And crazy. Washington, even with Washington, they're still 14-6 combined. They have the best record of any division in the league. They're 11-3 outside their division, which is number 1. The division had 3 road victories last week, which was really impressive. But Washington here, this is basically a pick'em game with the Bears.
Yeah, it's around 1. It won at some shops.
So you have the Washington Commanders who are 1-4. The Bears are 2-3. The Commanders, poor Coach Ron Rivera, he had asked what was the difference between Washington and some of the other teams that have shown major improvement. And he says, quarterback. Is it what? Quarterback play.
But it's like, it's one of those things, like, we don't know like what motivates people. Maybe
absolutely
that offense needs like to be motivated.
Sure. It was just funny when you see a coach at a weak moment like that, where he just flat up says quarterback, But
my bigger issue with their last game was just the play calling. Like,
he's not long either, right? Yeah. It's not a good marriage right now. Combination of him, Wentz, all together with this team.
Yeah, the offense. Scott Turner.
They've had some bad stuff going on with just the organization for a while, with the ownership, with the name change. And then it's not been a great start for them.
Cheerleading assault thing going on.
Yeah. So, bad energy all over.
In terms of the game, I look at it like this. Bears aren't that good.
No.
Commanders aren't that good. The one thing that the Bears do well is they run the football. Per DVOA, which is the thing that Gino and I use pretty much the most to look to kind of determine how teams are, Washington ain't bad against the run, DVOA. That's like the one good thing.
So matchup-wise, they probably fare pretty well in this particular matchup with what the Bears really want to do.
Yep. And then you look at it, Carson Wentz, he's like 4th in the league in terms of passing. Bears have one good corner, which is going to take out Terry McLaurin. I think this is going to be a huge Curtis Samuel game. I just feel like this is the Commanders They have to win this game. Brian Robinson, he's going to be their lead back moving forward.
Second game back now.
Yep, he's in line for a good game. And I said this last week when we recorded, rookie coaches on the Thursday night are 40% ATS just because it's a change and stuff. They don't know what to do.
Different routine.
Yep.
The whole week is different.
Yep. So, I mean, it was at +1 or even money for them to straight up win. I just took the even money for them to straight up win.
Let's make this one of our 5. I'm with you on Washington. Yep. Last week was our first losing week. We were 2-3. We've been 3-2. We had our 3-2 stretch. The first 4 weeks snapped. We went 2-3 last week. So we got to get back this week and get that one back. Washington, I mean, they were down by 4 on the 2-yard line with a chance to win the game. And then
that was my issue with the play. I didn't like any other play design.
Me neither. Not at all. So
on the first down,
bad floater on first down, bad pass to the back of the end zone. I hate that play on first down when it's just one guy on like that fade. I hate it. Then second down, he almost throws an intercept, or second down, he throws into traffic at the goal line. It's another, like, there's a bunch of guys around there. It's a bad, like, so now all of a sudden you're at third down, intercepted, linebacker picks it off to end the game. I think they're a little feistier, and like you said, I just feel overall Washington's better. Talked about Brian Robinson Jr. This guy got shot in the preseason, and he's back, and he should be the guy now. The interior offensive line really struggled for Washington. That should be better in this game because the Bears don't present the same type of pressure. And I mean, they're 26th in scoring defense. That won't be an issue as much against the Bears because they're not as prolific of an offense. They had a game-winning drive that ends with an interception. And, the defense did make some plays, which was a positive. 6 sacks, 13 quarterback hits. And you were mentioning it. It's not as if Wentz has been completely anemic and miserable. He's just been very inconsistent. And what seems to have happened is, like, all of the mistakes that he's made have been capitalized on. All of them. Every time he throws an interception or makes a bad throw, it gets picked, it gets bobbled. Like, it very rarely is like, oh, bad throw. He got lucky that ball didn't get intercepted. He hasn't been lucky at all. I mean, he has 11 big time throws this year based on PFF, on their grading, which is second most among quarterbacks in the league. The problem is he has 9 turnover-worthy plays, which is 5th most. Like, all of those turnover-worthy plays are being capitalized on. I think it's a much better spot for him here. I mean, the Bears at one point last week gave up 17 straight completions. They allowed Cousins to complete his first 17 pass attempt in the first half. They only ran 18 passes, or they only ran 18 plays, and he had 17 straight pass attempts. Montgomery looked better. You were kind of on the be careful with the Herbert hype train. Like, just because a few weeks ago, everybody was jumping on him right away as like, he's going to be the next guy. I even wasn't sure, but Montgomery came back and he had a better game. And it was nice to see the Bears get a little more aggressive in the second half. They were sort of forced to. They scored 19 straight to take the lead in the fourth quarter. Fields went 12 of 13 in one little stretch. And you could see, like, glimpses, Erik, of what people might see with him when they say, okay, this guy has some ability, but, he also had 5 rushes for 36 yards in the second half. And there was a 52-yard touchdown run that got taken back because of a block in the back, or like an illegal block penalty. There are little things there, but I don't know if like down to down, he can do it enough to be the guy.
You need to see it consistently. He hasn't obviously taken the step forward that Trevor Lawrence has, which is, disappointing to see because I was high on the kid coming out of school. I will say this about the Bears. One thing that's kind of stood out to me in watching their film, every single second half, they played better than the first half.
Yep. They improve. They make some adjustments. They figure out what's kind of been working for them, and they start to, like, focus on the strengths, eliminate the weaknesses. Some games it makes them, like, ugly to watch where they don't throw the ball a whole lot, but they'll sort of realize and kind of use the first half as a script to see maybe we can make some adjustments in the second half. And you know what? That's not a bad thing to do with a team like the Bears that, I mean, they've won a couple games already this year, but I don't think anyone has intentions, or they have any intentions of feeling like they're going to be a playoff team, right? They're playing for the future, and to see audition these guys and what they have for this new staff.
Yeah, they're going to slow it down, grind it out, making an ugly game.
Let's go Washington on the Thursday night game. We'll talk more about that game. 11 o'clock, 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern time, 11 o'clock a.m. Pacific time on Thursday. Come check us out on social media. Erik, let's get into Ravens Giants. So we have Baltimore at the Giants. We have the 4-1 Giants and the 3-2 Baltimore Ravens here. Ravens are a 5.5-point favorite on the road. Last week, the Ravens pick up a victory, but this was probably Lamar's worst game throwing the ball. He had some bad overthrows. Missed a receiver in the first half, which resulted in interception. He missed multiple touchdown chances in the second half. Didn't have a great game overall, but trailing in the game, on the last drive, he had 4 runs for 31 yards. He completed a couple passes to old steady Mark Andrews. They set up the game-winning field goal. They actually had negative EPA per pass play for the game, but Lamar did run overall 10 design carries, 53 yards, 4 first downs. They went away from that normal, played a too high zone shell, as opposed to leaning on the single high man-to-man coverage that they'd been playing before. So it did confuse Cincinnati a little bit. As a group, it was pretty good. Marlon Humphrey actually looked pretty good. He only allowed 1 first down all game. They were easing back into the lineup some of their injured players. So I think in the next few weeks, with some of these guys coming back, like Staley and Humphrey and Dobbins, a few more games, I think they're going to start to look good. I mean, they could very easily be 5-0 this year. They did blow another lead in this game, though, Erik. That's concerning with them. But Justin Tucker, man, he hit a 61st straight field goal in the fourth quarter in overtime, which is the longest in NFL history. He is so good. And the thing about him is, like, he even more than like a football player, Justin Tucker is about as good as his job as like anybody is doing their job.
If there ever was a kicker that should be considered for a bigger contract, it's Justin Tucker.
Right? He truly is a weapon, because you know that you're like, okay, 50, 55, we're good. Really, like up to 60, you feel confident, but like he is about 10 yards deeper than you feel comfortable with any kicker.
Yeah. This game right here, this is an interesting game. On a lot of fronts. You have the Giants being 4-1, just had a huge victory over in London and came back. Historically speaking, teams that go over to London, the team they playing against goes over their team total. But in terms of the Ravens, you just kind of look at their schedule. They just beat the Bengals on Sunday Night Football, big rivalry, after they got embarrassed last year. And they have the Browns on deck. I mean,
they had the Bills, which was a big game before that too, like a couple back-to-back big games.
To fade them. And I'll be honest, if the Giants weren't at, if they weren't at London the week before,
I would be playing the Giants.
Yeah.
But that worries me late in the game with like a running team like Baltimore, because Baltimore could just wear them down like physically late. But you're right. With what Baltimore has on deck, with what they just went through with a couple of big games, emotional games, like all their games have been tight. And this Giants team like continues to overachieve, and they're not getting a whole lot of respect because they haven't been like incredibly blow you out impressive. But there are a few things last week that were really, really that impressed me. They finished second in EPA per play with a huge game script against them. They had to come from behind with no receivers. Daniel Jones finished 4th in completion percentage above expectations of all quarterbacks last week. 12 of his 27 pass attempts produced a first down. That was the 3rd highest of any quarterback last week. Before that, only 25% of his pass attempts had produced first downs, which was 30th out of 32. He finished the game 13 for his last 14 in the second half. He rushed 7 times for 37 yards before kneeling on the ball late. Doing that without so many of their weapons. I mean, Barkley had to come out of the game for a little while, but he still had 70 yards rushing and another 36 yards receiving. He is averaging 1.7 yards over expectation on his carries this year. That's 3rd best in the league. So 3rd best at getting more than he was supposed to based on that particular play. And I mean,
speaking of Barkley, the one prop that kind of piques my interest in there, and it's always hard because these props come out later and later and later in the week, would be his over in receiving yards. Ravens do give up a lot of receiving yards to the backfield. And that's one of the bets that I'll tell you what, that this is running back receiving yards is slowly becoming my favorite bet.
Yeah. I nailed one the other day. The one that I had was Jacobs over 18.5 on Monday night. I mean, he crushed that early. And they just it seems like one of the props that they're still not quite as sharp on with the lines, that they're maybe a game or two behind some of the numbers where, man, a lot of these NFL lines now, like in games in particular, are so sharp. And now overall, the prop market is becoming a lot sharper and touchdown scores are becoming sharper, all that stuff.
Just something to think about. And like, this is, going to be one of my things, but just a segue kind of what you're saying. Everyone's talking about the Falcons, how they've covered 5 games in a row, right?
Yep.
No one's talking about how the lead opposing back against the Chiefs has gone over their receiving prop 5 weeks in a row.
Which is just as valuable for you if you're playing that, right? So it's just the information isn't quite as widespread or talked about quite as much. And you get it right here from Erik. Yeah, the Giants, they simplified that offense, which has been good. Last year, we saw them just give up in situations. They're not asking Jones to do a whole lot. Short passes, intermediate stuff, space being created, and then the other routes, they create space for the primary read. This is a smart staff. I don't know yet in a small sample size like this if they're a staff that can win you a Super Bowl, but they are in a lot better hands than they were before. And they just, like, you compare a staff like this to what you're seeing in Denver, where they have players and they haven't been able to put those players in spots to succeed. And then on the flip side, the Giants are dealing with all of these injuries, and they're making like the best lemonade out of the lemons that they're given right now.
I mean, to say this is a much better staff is like the most politest thing you've ever said in your life.
Right? Yeah, absolutely.
It's night and day. You mentioned it with the sets they're running. They're limiting how much of the side of the field he looks at. They're just putting him in a position to win, and that's what a coaching should do. In terms
is there a number? Is there a buy-in number for you on the Giants side? Like, does it get to the point where you're like, okay, the London doesn't bother me?
They played in London last week.
Yeah, me too.
If you play in London last week, you're immediately off the board for me.
Yeah. Yep. Let's move to the next game. We've got Bengals versus the Saints. So the Bengals have come in off. The Bengals have lost on walk-off field goals after overcoming double-digit deficits in their losses this year. They have 3 losses by a combined 8 points. Okay. So in all of them, same thing. Down big, come all the way back, lose on a walk-off field goal. Burrow had a bad game last week. The Ravens did a smart thing. They just sort of confused him a little bit. His lowest completed air yards of his career, average EPA per play was below average on offense. And they did that against a Ravens defense that was ranked dead last in pass defense coming into the week. So it was a really nice job by the Ravens to make a few adjustments there and make Cincy kind of stifle them a little bit. And the more I watch them, man, I really don't think Taylor is a good coach. You've never really felt like he was. And last year they had a run where they were able to, like, their talent was able to just sort of carry them. But when their talent isn't able to do that, sometimes he doesn't scheme these guys open. Chase isn't getting any easy looks or anything in space at all. It's all short stuff where it's all congested. They can't really run the ball well at all. They keep trying. It's been a little bit better, but, coming into the game, Baltimore had allowed 30 completions of 11 air yards or more, and Cincinnati had 4 completions over 11, but none over 20. So only a few that were just like big plays, but not even like the huge plays that Cincinnati was really we knew them for last year. On the flip side, you had the Ravens blitzed at the lowest percentage of plays that Joe Burrow had ever faced. So they weren't putting as much pressure on him, like forcing blitzes. They were really good in coverage, and he was having a tough time. They play the Saints here. So we're seeing this number right now at Bengals as a slight favorite.
Yep.
Last week, I mean, there's been a lot going on for the Saints. That's what's been hard to play this team or to take a whole lot out of their first 5 weeks, Erik, because, I mean, we've had Jameis in and out. Dalton's come in. Hill has played some. Thomas, Kamara, Landry all in and out with the new head coach. So it's been really hard to get a feel for this team.
So I look at it like this, let's piggyback to the Bengals. You mentioned like that their running game, basically they changed their blocking scheme, and Mixon is just completely confused where the hole is. So that's the issue with what's going on there. With the change in the blocking scheme, then bringing in so many new pieces, and Burrow missing part of camp because of the appendicitis. I think that has kind of led to like the timing, the issues, and him getting rushed. I think it's just a combination of all that.
They're all backed up a little bit, right? It's just not like it wasn't a well-oiled machine coming in.
Their most successful play last year was, oh no, blitz, okay, hot route, throw it up the chase. And now it's kind of like the offensive line, you know what I mean? Like he doesn't have time to do that because they're getting him, because the blocking scheme they switched to has just been a complete train wreck.
There's a lot of similarities that they have that the Rams have. It's kind of funny.
There's a lot of stuff going on there. But I mean, like, it goes back to coaching, because I feel like the offensive line talent that the Bengals have is well above what the Rams have right now. If that makes sense.
Yes, I agree with you. They have more options, it feels like, right now of what they could do to make it work. Whereas the Rams are going to need like the buy, and they're going to need to make a move or two. And it seems like Odell or another playmaker, but the Rams are going to need, I think, to get some more personnel, another. Yeah,
they're going to need to get something. But looking at, I feel like, with Kamara coming back, they added a big piece to the offense. He looked great. Then you put in the packages for Hill, that adds something. I just kind of feel like I'm looking at the Saints the last 2 weeks. They're headed in the right direction. Their offense is starting to finally have an identity. I feel their DVOA, because Davenport and Jordan missed some time, is a little under the radar. You have the Bengals coming off back-to-back road games, a Sunday night primetime game against the Ravens. You know what? I like the Saints here. I locked them in at 2. I think they win this game straight up. I just think this is the Bengal and the Saint, the whatever that's called. What was it called now? The Super Dome at Little Caesars or whatever.
Oh, there we go.
You know what I mean? Like Caesar, you know what I mean? Like, because they change it. That's a real tough place to play. It's really loud. I think with the offensive line issues, there's going to be a lot of false starts. I just like the Saints here. I think it's a great number. Offense, like I said, looking a lot better with Kamara. And Carmichael's doing some interesting things where he's lining up Kamara and Olave on the same side.
Kamara looked a lot better last week. It should be a better game for him. I'll probably stay away. I don't think I have this like a strong opinion one way or the other in this one. So real intriguing watch. Like, this is a big game for the Bengals. You don't want to go to 2-4 right now where everyone's sort of clumped together. Big game for both of these teams.
For our under, that's a good look at.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Let's continue along to the Jags versus the Colts. So, gosh, Erik, there is such a weird thing going with these two teams. With this division overall, where like you have the Jags who can't beat the Texans. They lost.
Like the Colts can't beat.
I know.
You know what I mean?
It's so weird. The Jags can't beat the Texans. Colts can't beat the Jags in the Jags, right? Like at Jacksonville. And just overall, they've really struggled with them. It's so funny. And last week you were on the Texans, and that was a really good spot. We kind of like them too, because it just felt like Jacksonville was getting a little bit too much buzz after their couple big victories, their back-to-back big wins, when one of them was against a really banged up Chargers team that may have looked a lot better on paper. And then last week against Philly, they really struggled. This week, Trevor Lawrence had a completion percentage 15% below expectation, which was the worst mark in the league. Inaccurate, poor decision-making. 2nd and 1 at the Texans 7, throws it right into 2 defenders. Really bad decisions early in the end zone. And then another one to end the game. 4th and 1 at the Texans 38, and there's a zone read. He hands it off. If he would have just kept it, he would have easily picked up a first down. And that's not even a throw. That's just keep it or hand off. When, like reading the defense, that's just looking at it. Can you see it? And The Jags outgained the Texans by almost 200 yards. 3 times in the red zone. They ended up with only 3 total points on the game, though. And they had one of the worst penalties you'll see by Walker to give the Texans a first down late in the game. It just sort of looked like old Jaguar stuff from last year. But they forced 8 turnovers the first couple weeks, just 1 forced the last 2. Now let's go to the Colts a little bit. The Colts are a 3. Now it's down to 2. It's 2-point favorite here.
1. I'm seeing 2 and 1.5.
Yeah. And
I think that's more with Taylor not practicing today.
Ryan had his worst overall offensive grade of the year last year in that ugly game against last week in that ugly game against Denver.
Real quick, just to counter that. If that was Carson, like that's the difference. That's why and I'm not the biggest Matt Ryan guy at all, but that game right there, with how the Colts were going, how were they trending? They needed that game last week.
Yes.
And that's why you have Matt Ryan, because he can look like absolute dog crap, but somehow BS his way to a win. You know what I mean? Like Carson Wentz, he couldn't have won that game last week.
No, he would have made a too big of mistakes, and he would have sort of cratered. Ryan was bad, but I know what you're saying. It was a different sort of bad. With the O-line, they were bad. They gave up 5 sacks and 1 hit and 14.
But when push came to shove, he put him in a position to win.
Yep.
And that's why, like with some of these teams, you need that veteran quarterback. And to me, that was a season-saving win for the Colts.
They had a win expectancy in that game of 6.2%. That's the second lowest for a winner this year. That was only trailing the Miami Dolphins when they came back to beat Baltimore in that game.
I mean, like that's a season-saving win. If
completely agree.
That game, Wright's probably out. You know what I mean? It's a completely different story. Now, like, you're back in this. You got a chance to win this division and get stuff going in the right direction, get Shaq Leonard back. Alex Pierce is looking great. I did a deep dive. Frank Wright at home as a favorite of 2.5 or to a pick 'em. 6-0 ATS. Flip side, at home, he's 1-2-2 against the Jags. Colts, worst graded offense in the league per Pro Football Outsiders. The Jags,
they're dead last in DVOA. They're dead last in passing, dead last in rushing offensive DVOA. And their offensive line is 31st in adjusted line yards, 30th in sack rate. I mean, they're bad in a lot of metrics, but it feels like another decent spot for them. So you like the Colts in this spot?
Sometimes I have nothing in this spot.
Yeah, me neither. I don't either.
Know what to do in this spot, and I'll be honest. Whoever loses this game, I'm probably going to look at South Futures.
Because they'll have a lot of value in a division that's still wide open and that will separate a whole lot of teams. So we may just be able to get the best value on whoever it is, next week or after this game. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Let's continue along as we move to Vikings Dolphins. So we have the Vikings. So this is Teddy B, right?
Well, this is the thing. Like, he hasn't been cleared yet. It looks, I don't know. He hasn't been cleared yet. I kind of think the NFL is just kind of handing it to the Dolphins for how stuff happened.
For how they handled the whole situation.
I think they're just kind of handling it and kind of making a point out of it. The Dolphins, per Rappaport's planning to start Skylar Thompson this week and have Teddy Bridgewater as backup. So, that looks like it's going to do.
So for anyone that didn't know, because of what happened,
Will Massa, McDaniel's going to start Tyler Thompson Sunday, regardless if Teddy Bridgewater is cleared.
Okay. So Skylar Thompson, who, he wasn't put in a really great spot. He was a 7th round rookie playing in his first game as a 3rd stringer. He was pressured on 18 of 35 dropbacks. He got hit 15 times, but only 2 sacks. Now, some of those were his fault. He held on the ball a little too long. But of all those pressures, the fact that only 2 resulted in sacks, he did a pretty good job there. And Hill didn't even play the last 9 minutes of the game after getting stepped on coming into the game. He had a quad injury. spotted in a walking boot after the game, but he said he's fine. Now, all of a sudden, though, you're down to your third string quarterback. Left tackle Armstead left the game with a toe injury. Hill is a little bit banged up. It's crazy in the NFL how quickly things change, right? Just a few weeks ago, this team was the darling of the league. Now, all of a sudden, they're severely banged up, and they're a 3.5-point underdog here at home against the Vikings team. It can go quickly for you, Erik. And it's not like this team ever really looked as good as their record was. Offensively, they were fine. They're the number 6 DVOA, even after week 5 where they had the third stringer, but they're the number 25 defensive DVOA and the number 32 pass defensive DVOA. So, I mean, they have major weaknesses.
I look at it like this. I like on my stream on Tuesday night, I gave out the Finns at +3. I locked him in at +3. I assume Bridgewater is going to play. There has to be some reason why Skylar Thompson is playing. I'm going to trust Mike McDaniel here. I think what he's doing there offensively is great. And I'm going to say it. In my eyes, the Vikings are the biggest bluff in the league.
Me too. At 3.5, this is, for me, this is more of an anti-Minnesota play than it is I love the Dolphins in this spot. But if you're going to give me more than the 3 at home against the Vikings team that, man, diving into each one of their games, like they honestly could have lost everything since week 1. Week 1 is the only game that never felt like they were really going to lose. And they played a Green Bay team without their start, like that was so banged up without both of those offensive linemen. Remember the rookie wide receiver dropped the touchdown, the wide open touchdown early in the game. And Alexander was kind of mad about how they schemed that game and Jefferson. So like that game isn't as good. And now we're seeing that the Packers overall, even at their full strength, aren't that great.
Yeah. And the Lions, if Dan Campbell wasn't an idiot, they
beat them. They last week, the Bears had them. The Bears came all the way back.
The Bears fumble, the double doink in London. And I mean, like you mentioned Miami, Minnesota, 28th DVOA in defense, 26 pass, 23rd against the rush. This defensive unit isn't that good. Miami's actually decent against the rush. They're 7th DVOA. I think they're going to limit what's his face? Cook and Madison. They're going to play this too under man look. I think that's going to kind of limit what Jefferson is going to be able to have. I think this would be more of a Thielen game. I like Miami here, and I live in the central north. I live in the Chicagoland area. And it has been dirt-ass cold here for the last couple of weeks. It's even colder in Miami. Now you're going to 80 degrees. Come on.
Or it's even colder in Minnesota. And then you go from there to Miami. Yeah, you go from there to Miami. Man, we've locked this in for our second play, Miami +3.5 for you and me. Jefferson, I mean, they got him the ball again last week. That was great. Cook's playing time has decreased in every game this season. Madison was used on more third downs, more 2-minute drills, and in short yardage situation. Something to keep an eye on. I mean, it was a nice game for Cousins, but this defense is actually, even though they're bad, they're not necessarily, they have a couple more playmakers on it than the Bears defense, I think. And it's a good spot for Miami with everything that's been happening recently to kind of be getting it over a field goal at home. We're both on the Dolphins here. Let's move to the Patriots and the Browns. So we've got the Browns. I mean, on paper, this is a great matchup just for what the Patriots want to do well and where the Browns are struggling. They're bad against the run because their interior defensive line is not great. And they are 30th overall in defensive DVOA. Their playoff chances fell by 27% after losing that game to the Chargers. And Brissett, when you dive into his game-by-game numbers, he's been overall really, really good through a lot of these games, but there are 2 games where he threw awful interceptions late in the game that cost him probably both of these games. I mean, they had a chance to win this game late with 2 minutes and 44 seconds, third down. He throws an interception when they're already in field goal range. They would have gone up by 1 at least, and they still got the ball back and had a chance to win the game with a 54-yard attempt that went wide right. So now they're 2-3. They could be 5-0. one of their wins came on a game-winning field goal. They could be 1-4.
Yep.
You know?
So I look at it like this. Okay. You meant you said they could easily be 5-0, correct?
Yep.
They've had some stuff go against their way. I said this last week, and I'm pulling up the number right here. I think there's value betting the Browns to win it all. I think there's value. I'm pulling it up right now. They are currently 60-1 to win it all. So just to put in reference, they're less than the Colts, which we just talked about, that are a train wreck. Less than the Dolphins, everyone's banged up. Less than the Bengals, train wreck. Less than your Rams, who have some issues. Less than the Packers, who have some, you know what I mean? Like, they're less than a lot of teams that have a lot of issues. They've just had some bad breaks. This field,
and they may have that built-in sort of ceiling with Watson.
You're getting Watson back. So that's just, I think it's worth throwing a half a unit, whatever your half a unit is, 25, 50, $5, $10, whatever your half a unit size is. I think it's worth a financial investment of throwing a half a unit on the Browns right now. In terms of this game, this is what I look at. I took the Browns -2.5 here because the Browns are number 1 DVOA running the ball. The Patriots are 28th DVOA defending the run. The best running back on the field is who? Nick Chubb.
134 rushing yards last week, 105 after contact, 10 missed tackles forced on the ground, 32 missed tackles so far this year. That is 10 more than second.
And when you have that rushing attack, what's that going to do? It's going to open up the passing game. You look at the wide receivers, Amari Cooper is the best wide receiver on that field. So I really think this is going to be a spot for the Browns. I think the Browns need the game more than the Patriots. I think the Patriots are getting a little bit overvalued.
I agree completely.
I was able to get this at 2.5.
And
also,
that's what under 3 you're fine with?
Yep. Under 3 I'm completely fine. Under 3 or under I'm completely fine with. If it gets 3.5, I wouldn't do anything. Jones could be coming back. So if Jones comes back, that this line could move a little bit more. Chubb, I gave Chubb out here, I believe 10-1 to lead the NFL in rushing. He's 593. The guy's playing great. I just think it's a tough matchup for the Patriots, especially if a rookie going into Cleveland. Cleveland's a tough place to play. Yeah,
Zappy played pretty well last week. They shut down your Lions, but again, that was a Lions team who Goff isn't as good on the road. They're still dealing with some injuries. Yeah, the Lions in that game, were there 5 defensive backs that got hurt during the game? Yep. I think throughout. I mean, it was pretty incredible to see that many players getting hurt. Stevenson looked really good. I mean, and he's someone that you pointed out. He is 4th among running backs in success rate, and he is also he's like all of the advanced metrics that you're looking at, he's towards the top, which, you wouldn't have necessarily thought of Stevenson as one of those guys, but he had 113 yards after contact last week. He had 25 carries after the Harris injury, and they run the ball well, but I'm with you at under 3. Let's write down the Browns, and maybe that'll be another one of ours, because I think they're still getting a little bit undervalued right now, and I still think the Patriots are getting a little bit overvalued here. So let's take the Browns minus the 2.5 right now as we continue along.
I'm surprised I'm surprised you're not jumping out but down after the Dodgers just tied it, man.
I know we're recording for everyone that's listening. We're recording on Wednesday night, right during the start of the Dodger game, which is great because, if I'm going to have to record at one point, I'd rather do it at the start than at the end, right? But in the first inning, they gave up a home run. I was sort of watching, and then right there, I kind of paused for a second when I was like, just to see if it was going to creep over the fence, and the Freeman ball just got over. So brand new ball game as the Dodgers head to the second inning. And we had to talk about the Jets and the Packers. So the Packers built an early lead last week. And remember, they played in London last week. And then I was really, really kind of confused by what they were doing in the second half. So they scored 0 points. They had a 63% rushing success rate, but they kept throwing the ball. They had a negative 0.51 EPA per play against the Giants passing without their best quarterback. Rodgers was 0 for 5 on attempts of 20 or more yards down the in the air and 0 for 4 in the second half. And the offensive line actually played pretty well. They only gave up 1 sack, 1 hit, and just 2 hurries. But that was a bad loss for a Packers team that had a banged-up starting quarterback, was missing all of its top wide receivers. Last week, they played a Patriots team that had Zappy playing, and they almost lost. And, I mean, they let the Giants score on 5 straight drives. This team is 23rd in defensive DVOA. They are 30th in defensive run DVOA. They have major weaknesses, Erik, this Packers team. And while I don't necessarily think that the Jets are a good football team, this is a kind of a good spot at this right moment for the Jets here, in that they've been running the ball pretty well lately, and they're playing against a team that's struggling, that's not good against the run, and a team that just came back from London. And you were pointing out the facts about the teams returning from London. I'm a little bit worried just because the Jets come off of like such a big win, and they crushed such an opponent. And like, this is a young team with a young coach. Like, how are they going to respond? And this feels sort of like a moment when the Packers, have one of their better performances of the year. That's the only thing that scares me, is like, this felt like a play against for the Jets too. But man, like, at over a touchdown, I'm almost enticed to play the Jets in here. Talk to us about this one.
So the important thing to remember is this coaching staff very familiar with themselves. The Jets offensive coordinator and Mike LaFleur, brothers with Matt LaFleur, very tight. Matt LaFleur and Robert Saleh, I always say his name.
Saleh, you got it. There we go.
I mean, these guys have been coaching together since they were grad assistants at Central Michigan University. They stood up in each other's weddings. These guys are insanely close. So the one thing that does kind of take me to the Jets is LaFleur's not going to blow him out just because of how tight they are.
Just to rub it in. Yeah.
Yeah, he's not going to do that. My worry with betting the Jets is this. I never want to bet a team when they're valued the most.
Yeah. The only thing is
the Jets are. So
does the number say that, or is it built into the number, or just sort of like the narrative? Because if this game was and that's what's because that's where I've been trying to like, and that's a great point. Something that we have to differentiate, or like, is it something that you differentiate? Because I try to look at things and see if a lot of people are talking about it, but it still doesn't feel like it's built into the number. I don't worry as much. But then on the flip side, should you worry more? Does that mean that a lot of sharp money has come on the other side to even things out? It's one of those things that's sort of hard to determine. I think it's sort of a case by case for me, that like, I wouldn't play the Jets in here at even 7 or 6.5. I think I would need the 7.5 and above, because then I feel like that's still value, and maybe the Jets aren't valued. But I agree, like, man, when you dive into that game, I mean, the Dolphins were in the game late, and the score was not nearly as bad as it should.
They drove down and
with the chance to take the lead in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, and they missed that field goal, and that's when that's kind of when everything. What's the word I'm looking for?
Just like quicksand. Yeah, it was just the last. They scored 3 touchdowns, I think, in the fourth quarter. Just boom, boom, boom. But that's what makes this game difficult. Like, I'm leaning Jets. They were 7th in EPA per play last week. It was their first win since week 12 of the 2019 season. That was by multiple scores. And Wilson was like decent. That's again what you were saying about Matt Ryan. In a situation like that, where the Jets were playing a third string quarterback, a Miami team that's probably a little bit shell-shocked by what's going on because they're dealing with that in the middle of the game, all you need is your quarterback to not be a train wreck that game. You know, all you need is them to just not make a bunch of mistakes, and you're probably going to be in good shape. And you know what? That's what Wilson did last week. 14 for 21, 2 big-time throws, no turnover-worthy plays. only his third career start without a turnover-worthy play. And the defense put pressure on Miami. Hall looked really good. First Jets rookie in history to finish with 100 yards receiving and a rushing touchdown. He had 197 yards from rushing. He almost had 100 rushing and receiving yards. Coming into the week, they had 1 rushing touchdown this year. They had 5 on Sunday. But is this enough for you to get on the Jets here?
The only thing I'm looking at is this. And again, it's hard because none of these numbers are out. Green Bay 30th DVOA. They're giving up 80.6 yards per game to lead opposing running backs. I'm interested in Bryce Hall's prop. That would be the only thing that I would look into getting invested in. And like I said, if it's like in the 80 range, I wouldn't get it. The market adjusted last week because both Damian Harris and Stevenson went over the rushing prop, and it hung an 83.5 for Saquon Barkley, who finished with 70. So if this is in the 60 range, I'll be investing in Bryce Hall. If not, I'm just going to pass.
Let's get to 49ers versus Falcons. 3-2 49ers, the 2-3 Falcons, as we see this line at about San Francisco minus 5.5 on the road, over under around 44.5. So for the Falcons, they had a brutal roughing the passer call late in the game that cost them the chance to win that game. It was not a penalty at all. They would have gotten the ball back with a chance to win. Pitts was out. London only ran like 22 of the 34 pass plays, saw a career low of offensive snaps, which was kind of weird. Now, the 49ers, they're starting to have some injuries pile up, Erik. On the defensive side, last week we had Bosa, Kinlaw, Mosley injuries, and Bosa was the league leader in sacks and pressures, but they have that really nice sort of system where they just run the ball really well. Wilson ran the ball 120 yards on 17 carries, 4 explosive runs. You know, Jimmy G, for all the crap that he gets, and you've pointed this out a few times, he is 35-15 in his first 50 starts as a quarterback with a 99 passer rating in those games. Since 1970, there have been 2 quarterbacks who have won 35 of their first 50 starts with a 98 or higher passer rating. Jimmy G and Mahomes.
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy what he's doing. Yeah, and I had a real big issue, and I wasn't financially invested in the Falcons game at all, with how that ended, because that's the second week in a row Jerome Broger has made a god-awful roughing the passer call. Most people, actually everyone in America, if they're bad at their job or they mess up at their job, what do? They get fired. He's got nothing. When you factor in now that gambling is legal and the NFL is partnering with sports books, that's just a bad overall look. And there's been no word from Roger Goodell. There's been no word from the NFL officials. And then you have Tom Brady saying, well, I'm not the one that throws the flags. You know what I mean? I'd have more respect for him if he was like, look, dude, it was a bad call. We took advantage of it. You know what I mean? Instead of like being that smug. This game to me, I took the Falcons at plus 5.5.
I think that's the play here.
I mean, Armstead isn't even with the team right now. The team stayed on the East Coast. They didn't go back and forth. They stayed on the East Coast. They're training in West Virginia this week. He's not even there. You mentioned Bosa's not even there. Bosa's hurt. Also, Kinlaw and Ekwam are hurt. So that the 49ers could be out without their starting 4 defensive linemen. Robbie Gould is hurt. He's supposed to get evaluated on Friday. He suffered a left knee injury. They may not even have a kicker. You mentioned Mosley. Jimmy Ward is hurt. And they're down all the way to their 3rd string tackle. This team is really beat up. And this was an interesting trend. Now, I wasn't able to find if a team stayed on the East Coast and went back, but teams that are playing back-to-back East Coast games that are on the West Coast, 46% ATS.
And that second game.
The second game. Shanahan, I say it every week, there's certain games that you know what I mean? There's certain teams, certain coaches I like to take as dogs, certain coach I like to fade as favorites. That's my boy Shanahan. He's 40%. ATS is a favorite. I think this is a huge spot to fade the 49ers, who I think are a little inflated in the market after winning on Monday Night Football and putting Matt Rule to death after that embarrassing game. So I like the Falcons here. I'm going to be on the 5.5. I'm already invested in the 5.5, and at plus 200, I think the money line's worth a buy too.
Yeah, their offensive line isn't playing particularly well individually. As a unit, they did a pretty good job, like scheming around some of their weaknesses, and they limited some negative plays. But the special teams you mentioned with Gold, and then there's also been the kick returns, the kickoff returns. They gave up 48 and 45-yard kick returns. They had a field goal blocked for the second time this year. Let's make the Falcons one of our plays plus the 5.5. Let's move to.
Are we turning into an Atlanta Falcons football show?
I mean, we love the Falcons here. They've at least been able to counter our Baker and Panthers losses for the most part. So luckily that we've had the Falcons give us the good so far, and then we've been killed by the Panthers. I think when I was diving in, 4 of our losses this year out of the 11 that we have.
It's like I'll be honest. We'll get to the game. They're on my I can't bet list.
Right now, for a little while, I just can't. No, I just can't. And like, this would be the week you'd want off of the coaching bump, maybe you'd think. But then the fact that they have a quarterback that's hurt, it's not as if Baker's been playing great, but PJ's had a couple starts that have been really bad. A couple that have been okay, but a couple that have been really bad.
And I'll pass it on when we talk to that game.
So let's go Tampa versus Pitt. Attaboy Kershaw as we continue along. Tampa.
You're riding out Kershaw. And I'm grinding out Wheeler over 5.5 strikeouts where he just gave up something when he was ahead 0-2 in the count.
That's right. Yeah. We got the screen-to-screen action going on as we move to Tampa versus Pitt. So we've got, man, the Steelers. Like, this is about as bad as it's been for them. I mean, honestly, since before Ben, right? Because they haven't had a losing season since Tomlin. And at least when Ben was there, even in the last few years when he was not good, they sort of felt like they weren't one of the worst teams in the league. You still had like a quarterback there. You still had sort of an identity. Man, this is a hard team to get excited about, but this is the type of situation that our guy Tomlin does get excited about when they just got crushed by the Bills. And I got to say, that was pretty cheap what the Bills were doing late in that game to pick it, going after the legs and stuff. Like, I just didn't think that was really necessary. But I mean, there's not much in watching the Steelers games that I get excited about or that I can take as a positive to play them. I can just say that this is a good spot for them coming back home, being really undervalued because everyone just saw them get crushed. And then you have Tampa, who won a game that we both just said they may not even have won that game if the correct call was made in the roughing the passer call late. Like, Atlanta would have had the ball back with a chance late in the game. The Steelers, they couldn't get a sack now. They've just had 3 sacks in the last 4 games since Watt got hurt. Last week, they threw the ball 52 times. They had just 3 points. That margin of defeat is the worst for the Steelers, but it was sort of hard. Like, I'm not going to come out of that game and take a lot of analysis in like the game by game, in the game, like played down to down stuff. They were playing the Bills with Pickett making their first start on the road in a really tough situation. Warren, the running back, has actually looked kind of interesting. He's been a little bit better than Harris. Harris looks hurt.
He's
right.
Hurt.
I mean, he's been 36th in success rate, 3 yards per carry. Warren has more avoided tackles per carry, higher first down rate, higher yards after contact per carry than Harris. But like, let's go to Tampa. A couple things to point out for them. Big game for Fournette last week. He led the Bucs in carries, rushing yards, rushing touchdowns, targets, receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns. Pass blocking unit held up pretty well. They didn't allow a sack on the day, holding the Falcons to just 4 total pressures and a 10% pass rush win rate. But they gave up 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, and they had a chance to lose the game. Gave up big plays on the ground. Mariota had 61 yards rushing. The defense, though, did put pressure on 36% of the dropbacks, 5 sacks there. And Brady, this was a cool stat. Doesn't really have much to do with like how you handicap these games moving forward. But Brady won his 23rd game when he attempted 50 passes, including the playoffs. No other quarterback since 1950, when these stats started being kept, has more than 5 wins when they've attempted 50. Because for any other quarterback, if you're throwing the ball 50 times, you're down big, right, Erik? But for Brady, he's been able to turn that short passing game into basically a running game. And there's so few teams and players who can actually throw the ball so accurate, so quickly, have that quick release, are smart. They can read the defenses as Brady. I mean, this really wouldn't work if you tried to replicate it in a bunch of different places. He's just like a savant.
Yeah. I mean, he whines a lot, and I'm not, and that kind of annoys me, but he's just at a whole different level. You mentioned the Tomlin spot, 65% ATS, 84% AT, 65% ATS as a dog, 84% as a home dog. This is the Mike Tomlin spot. If they had Watt on the defensive line, this defense is night and day with no Watt. I can't get anything invested in the Steelers.
I gotta stay away too, I think.
Not in it. And look, I know people are getting love for Kenny Pickett in the market. I just don't like Kenny Pickett. Like, I just, what, I haven't seen anything where I'm gonna get involved in it. I don't like, like when you see the writing on the wall that a wide receiver is going to turn into one of these prima donna wide receivers.
Yes.
I see that with Pickens. And Najee Harris is hurt, and Deontay Johnson still has his drop issues. I just can't get involved. No, now watch the Steelers win by 14.
I know. We both want to. It feels like the spot. If this got to 10, would you get involved?
I'm no.
No, it's just you can't.
I can't, like I said, I will not bet the Steelers.
You need to see more.
Yeah.
Let's move to Cardinals Seahawks. So, man, Geno through 5 games, number 1 in offensive grade and in passing grade. Last week, he had 5 big-time throws, 3 passing touchdowns, and just 1 turnover-worthy play. The Seattle team, they're pretty simple. They're the number 1 offensive DVOA and number 31 in defensive DVOA. They have a fun offense. They have a terrible defense. In the last 4 weeks, they've allowed more than 34 points per game, which is dead last in the league. And last week, they couldn't stop the Saints, who weren't the greatest offense coming into the week. They allowed Hill and Kamara to both rush for 100 yards. And now for them offensively, Penny has a fractured tibia. So it was about Walker getting his first real opportunity. And Max Muncy hits one out. Muncy. There we go. After the struggle of Max Muncy this year, it's been a brand new season for him. I love that when people listen to this like Thursday and Friday and Saturday, they're hearing us talk about the Wednesday baseball games that we're watching live. But on the opposite side, Arizona as a 3-point favorite on the road, they come in off a game, man, that they feel like they should have won. They had a chance to tie the game late. Murray, combination of things. Now, I had heard that on the board at the field, they flashed first down up on the screen so that Kyler Murray, if you were in the stadium after he slid, they put first down up there. So he may have thought, looking up at the board, it was a first down. Now, altogether, this just feels like something that would happen to the Cardinals and Cliff Kingsbury and a team that's and Kyler, like a team that's not all that well prepared, or maybe these are the kind of little things that you worry about with both Cliff and with Kyler, and the kicker misses a 43-yard field goal. This team has not scored in the first quarter 1 time this year. I mean, you can't do that every week. Like every single week, you can't just hope that Kyler's going to come back and play hero ball for you. And they had another big game for Brown, and Moore also had a nice game for Arizona. This is probably a DFS game, right, Erik?
Yeah, definitely a DFS game. I absolutely love it.
Are we on Geno here at plus the 3?
I've already locked it in. I gave it out last night. Carroll 61% ATS as a dog.
Gino.
67% ATS is a home dog. And Kingsbury, he fits in this thing. When he's a dog favorite, I don't bet him. I like to fade him. He's 36% ATS is a favorite. You mentioned the Seattle's having the top rated offense per DVOA, number one passing attack. Cardinals 26 overall, but in passing they are 27th. The two rookie tackles who I thought could struggle a little bit coming in are playing lights out. And with how the Seattle blocks, Kenneth Walker's running style actually fits better. He's more of, I think, Le'Veon Bell, just kind of linger behind the line, wait for the hole to develop, then they go. That's what Walker does, and that actually fits what he likes to do, how Walker likes to run. And are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
Coaches that have won a Super Bowl. You have to be a good coach to win a Super Bowl, right?
Sure, yeah.
Kingsbury is 43% ATS against a coach that has won a Super Bowl.
They just are. It's just like playing chess against someone that's just a different level than you, right? And then go play one-on-one against like a college basketball player if you think you're any good, and they'll just destroy you,
It's kind of like that video that went around when someone was playing Excalibur, that high school.
Yes, the pickup. Oh, yeah. That was great.
And one more thing to remember is, who did the Cardinals play last week?
The Eagles. And what happens after the war of attrition, after playing the Eagles, they get beat up. And that was a big game for the Cardinals, right? You're at home. You got an undefeated Eagles team coming. You're in this game all the way to the end. And it's sort of like emotional because you lose that way at the end. And now you got to kind of play a Seattle team that, they've been scoring, but you don't really think of them as a game that you circled on your, like, Geno Smith, he's probably going to come back to life. I like this spot right away. I like immediately one of the teams after the Eagles game last week that I wanted to play against, not only because of your angle with the playing against the teams after the Eagles game, but just the way that game went. Like, you get up for the big games against the big teams, and that was a big game for them. Okay, we're on Seattle. Gino. Let's get to Panthers versus the Rams. So we got Matt Rule out. Matt Rule was 11-27 overall, fired now from the Panthers. 1-28 when teams scored more than 17 points against him. They had Baker starting quarterback for the first 5 games. His QBR in the first 5 was 16.8. That is the second worst of any quarterback to start their team's first 5 games since they started tracking the stat in 2006. Now, Erik, trivia time for you, because I know you like playing these little games. Only one quarterback has had a worse QBR in their first 5 games. They started all 5 for a team since 2006. And my only hint will be, this is like a notorious bad quarterback that like gets talked about in like the all-time bads that, that a team thought this guy was their franchise guy. He wasn't like a backup. This was someone that a team wanted to build their franchise around. And I'll give you one more hint. Scissorp. He was sipping on some scissorp.
Drew Lock.
Jamarcus Russell.
Oh.
The only one who's been worse than Baker in the first 5 games of a year to start for a new team was Jamarcus Russell.
I completely forgot about that, dude.
So Baker actually had a decent game last week. He finished 14th overall on quarterback grade in the week. But, they entered last week with a 25% conversion rate on third down. They were 3 for 15 on Sunday. Like PJ Walker starting. He's funny because XFL guy. He had a 47% completion rate in the games where he's had 10 passes or more. But he's actually had 2 games where he passed for 20 or more. And in those games, he was really good because, he must have been throwing the ball well, so they kept passing. He had a 70% completion percentage twice in the games where he threw the ball a lot. The games where he throws like 12, 15 times, he's been pretty bad. This team was 31st in offensive DVOA. It's a great spot for the Rams because they're playing a team that normally would get a little bit of a bump, but Carolina has a bad quarterback here. Their offense has been miserable. Like, if the Rams lose this game, they really, really should be worried. The Rams are in kind of a nice spot, and not a spot where I'd want to bet them in this game at all. But for the Rams, they can hopefully get a little healthy on their bye and maybe try to figure a few things out. Can you play anything in this game? I mean, this number is 10. That is absurdly high for the Rams. I would want to play Carolina, but you had said they're on your no play list.
Yeah, I mean, you got one side, you got PJ Walker versus Aaron Donald. From what I'm being told is if Mayfield needed to go, he could go, if that makes sense. So I don't really know if it's a legit injury thing or they're just kind of, you know what I mean? They're just kind of making a switch. Walker with his RPO stuff with McCaffrey does bring another element to the table. My worry with the Rams is this. Carolina's front is actually decent.
Yeah.
The Rams have a million issues going on with the offensive line, which has been a huge issue. They're not able to run the ball. Akers, Henderson, they just haven't looked the same. I'm not doing anything. I have the Rams submitted as my survivor pick, and I'm seriously contemplating changing it to the Browns just because I'm that worried with how bad their offensive line is.
The only thing that makes me not quite as worried is the opponents they've played in those games that they've looked really bad, in that they played the 49ers, the Cowboys, and the Bills. So if we're talking about some of the best defenses in the league, those three teams are on there. I mean, that's literally the 1 and 2 defensive DVOA teams, and Dallas is 6th in overall. So, but you're right. Carolina, like, their strength, their defensive front is not bad. I'm just hoping that the offensive line will look a little bit more competent against not one of the top tier defensive fronts. But man, there haven't been a lot of things to get excited about with the Rams. They allowed 24 pressures on 46 pass blocking snaps. That's 52% pressure rate. That's the third highest.
A million. Oh my God. They had so much stuff go wrong for them last week. It was amazing how much stuff they had to go wrong with them. So they're due for some stuff. They're due for some luck. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're due for some stuff to go their way.
They only scored 19 points over the last 2 weeks. They ranked 29th in points, 26th in total offense. Worst start since Sean McVay has been a head coach. I mean, again, it's not like rocket science when you look at them. They're banged up. They have a bad offensive line. They have the worst running game. They average 62.4 ground yards per game, and that's last. So because of that, you're not running the ball. You put more pressure on Stafford, who, whether he's not completely healthy or whether he's trying to overcompensate for a bad line and not a great running game and not the great weapons other than Kupp, it's all like related. 21 sacks, which is an NFL high, 7 interceptions, NFL high. And they've scored the 5th fewest points ever by a reigning Super Bowl champion in the first 5 games of their title defense. The other 4 teams all missed the playoffs. Now, the nice thing, or the difference for the Rams, they have the highest total of those 5 teams, and there are more playoff teams now than in those years before. So they may have a little bit more leeway than some of the other teams, but they're not in great shape. But again, the defense played pretty well last week. They held Dallas to 10 completions and 102 passing yards. 9 of Dallas's 22 points came off Rams turnovers. So defensively, they're okay. Their numbers will start to even out, I think, on the defensive side. But this offensive line, man, they've been struggling. Erik, let's move to our final 2 games. We've got Sunday night we got 3 games, excuse me. We've got Bills, KC, Dallas, Philly, and then Denver, Chargers. Let's go Bills, Kansas City. This is the big one, the big rematch from last year where the Bills end up losing that tight, back and forth, incredible game. The Bills come off of their monster victory where they beat the Steelers easily last week. Allen might have been able to break the record for all-time passing yards if the game was closer. He had 348 yards passing and 4 touchdowns at halftime, all-time record is 554 yards in a game. I mean, they were up 38-3. They had no reason to keep going. Then you have Kansas City, who they had another bad play, a bad penalty call in their game that really flipped everything when they sacked Carr, and it was called a roughing the passer call, and it actually gave points to the Raiders and took the ball away from the Chiefs when they would have been in scoring range. They came back to win, but it really flipped the scoring in that game. And it was probably a flat spot for Kansas City. I mean, this is one of the games of the year that people have circled for a while, and the Bills are a 2.5-point favorite on the road going to KC, over under 54. Talk to us about this one.
I see some threes in the market. Now look, this game opened up at Chiefs -1. And right now you can get Chiefs +2 or Chiefs +3. To me, this just screams take the Chiefs if you're going to bet it at all. I really don't want to bet it because for me, I feel this is the game with how that game ended last year that the Bills have circled. That the Bills
totally agree. This is their Super Bowl before the Super Bowl.
But I do have a player prop that I'm going to be targeting. Okay. The Kansas City Chiefs give up the most receiving yards to opposing running backs. Week 1, James Conner went over his prop. Week 2, Austin Eckler went over his prop. Week 3, Jonathan Taylor went over his prop. Week 4, Leonard Fournette went over his receiving prop on the first play of the game. Week 5, Joshua Jacobs went over his receiver prop. They're giving up 5.8 receptions and 40 yards a game, receiving to opposing running backs. Devin Singletary is averaging 40 yards receiving a game. They also have some injuries in the wide receiver room, so he's going to be a factor. This prop's going to be somewhere 25, 26. I'm just going to take the over in that. That's the only thing I'm going to do in this game and just sit back and enjoy it.
I had that Jacobs one there too. I agree with you. Like, I like the Bills here, but the number is not great. I just don't want to take the Bills in that spot. Like, I think the Bills.
You missed the number.
Like, I missed out. And I wouldn't have played that earlier, but like, if this got to 3, then I think you buy in at Kansas City. Absolutely.
Yeah. Mahomes 7-0-1 as a dog in his career. And like I talked about it Tuesday night on my stream, like, don't play a bad number. With how live betting is, there's a million opportunities to bet now. It doesn't make sense for people to play bad numbers. Just sit back, wait to see if you get a better number on the Bills, if that's the side you like. If you don't, you don't, and just enjoy the game.
Let's move to Cowboys Eagles Sunday Night Football here. Big game, as these two teams have had really nice starts to the year. Looked like Dak got hurt in week 1. It was going to be tough for the Dallas Cowboys, but Cooper Rush has stepped in. He's won 4 consecutive games, and he's now 5-0 as a starter. He has a QBR that's ahead of Jalen, Brady, and Burrow. He has a higher than expected drop rate at 5.1%. His average throw has traveled 8.1 yards in the air, which would rank 10th since week 2. A lot of good metrics for him. They've beaten both the Bengals and the Rams, the two teams that were in the Super Bowl last year. And Rush was sacked 3 times, fumbled twice, but the Cowboys did get both of those fumbles. Now, he's played well, but last week was the week where he kind of came back to life a little bit. Dallas was 23rd in EPA per play on offense last week. So there was only one team that had a lower offensive EPA per play in a win last week, and that was the Colts. It's been all about their defense. They only had 4 first downs throwing the ball, 102 yards passing on 19 dropbacks, and Lawrence had a strip sack and a fumble recovery for a touchdown in the first quarter, and the defense had 3 takeaways, sacked Stafford 5 times, knocked him down 11 times. It was a nice game for Pollard, who had 8 carries, 86 yards, and a touchdown, over a 90 grade on Pro Football Focus rushing. On those 8 carries, 3 missed tackles and 75 yards after contact, 14 fewer carries than Elliott, but he still outrushed him. And then we have the Eagles here, who have been the best team in football so far. They're 5-0. Hurts is now over 1,300 yards rushing in his first 24 starts, 19 rushing touchdowns in his first in the first 25 games, which passes Cam for the most by a quarterback in the first 25. Brown had a quiet day yesterday, and they're still able to win, which I love. You try to take Brown out, then you have Goddard, 95 yards, Smith, 87 yards. You have, defensive playmakers like Reddick, 6 pressures on 28 pass rushing snaps. You have the rookie defender, Jordan Davis, who had 3 tackles and 2 stops. And the offensive line was really good, Erik. Only 9 pressures on the 40 snaps total. And they were playing without a left tackle. And they lost their left guard and their center for part of the game. Right guard was coming into the game with an ankle injury. So they've been able to patch it together even with some issues there. They had a different approach, a lot of screen passes last week. What do you think about the Eagles-Cowboys Sunday Night Football?
This is going to be the best offensive line that the Cowboys have played. Look, we talk about every week. Sometimes the ball just bounces the way. Sometimes you get lucky. With everything going on, I'm still completely dumbfounded how Dallas was able to win that game last week against your Rams. Just what you look at all the metrics, all the yardage, the clock, the plays, how Cooper Rush played. Rams should have won that. Number opened up at 4. It's at 6 right now. I just don't. I can't do anything because I missed the number because I liked Philly here. I'll look to take Philly live. The one thing I'm kind of interested in is this trend of primetime unders, which is becoming general knowledge in the general public now. I think this total is a little too low at 41.5. I would lean to the over of 41.5, and I'd look to play some Miles Sanders prop because the weakness of the Cowboys defense is the rushing attack.
Let's continue along to Monday Night Football. We have Broncos Chargers. We have the Chargers who come into the week, had a good week running the ball. They were number 1 in EPA per rush of all teams that played last week. They ran for 238 yards and 7 yards per carry. They came into the week ranked number 25. Now, with 1 minute and 13 seconds left to go on their own 46, they went for it on 4th and 1 to a short pass. They missed it. They put the Browns in field goal range with a chance, to win the game. It was actually the right call based on just percentages there. I don't know if I love the play, especially when Eckler was running so well. He had 5 runs of 10 plus yards or more. On the Broncos side, Wilson has just been bad, man. And now he looks like he's hurt. He suffered a partially torn lat in week 4. He had 2 interceptions last week, 4 turnover-worthy plays, finished behind Matt Ryan with 32 of 33 quarterbacks who took snaps. The only quarterback who was below him was Case Keenum, who was in mop-up duty for Buffalo. The defense continues to play well. I mean, that's how they're going to win games on the defensive side with Chubb, Jones, Purcell, Surtain. They just offensively and this coaching staff. Russ is 2 for 18 on pass attempts to the end zone, a completion rate of 11%. That is the worst in the NFL among quarterbacks with 10 or more. Late in the game, all they have to do is just run the ball or take a couple chances. They throw the ball in the end zone, in interception, which gives the Colts the ball in new life. It's like you can't even believe these things as they happen.
It's amazing. It is absolutely amazing what is going on and how bad he looks. And it kind of makes you think, with how good Seattle looks, and this is how Waldron wanted the offense to look last year, but for whatever reason, Wilson was against it. Was Wilson the issue? Because Carroll was getting dragged through the mud. I think Wilson was a little bit more of an issue. You have all these reports coming out about him having a torn lat. There's and it's been going on for a while. There's a rule in the NFL. You have to report injuries. You can't, you know what I mean? You can't just have a player out there.
I know.
Who has an injury that makes
this is like one of those after the fact injuries to try to make it sound a little bit better, I think.
Yeah, it's just they have so much issue. How can you trust Hackett? But on the flip side, who are the Chargers to be playing this many points? You know what I mean? This is a game for me. Unless I see some sort of trend with a player prop or something, I would kind of stay away. I know Denver does give up a lot of yards to the tight end. Maybe a sneaky thing, get some Gerald Everett props. I'd look at that. Yeah, that'd be the only thing I would kind of look into doing here.
Erik, we have Washington in a pick'em, Miami plus 3.5, the Browns minus 2.5, the Falcons plus 5.5, and Seattle plus 3 for our 5 plays.
That's Erik 5-0. That's 5-0, baby. Let's go.
Erik will be with me on Friday to talk some college football at 6 o'clock p.m. Eastern time at BTV Bets. Also Sunday at BTV Bets, 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern time for our full Sunday NFL preview. Erik, tell us what else you have going on this week.
Oh my God, I got way too much stuff. Every Saturday I go on my buddy Jason's podcast, his Strictly ATS, and we each give out our 5 best bets of the weekend. My podcast comes out Friday. I'm gonna be with you on the Santa Anita Pick'em show over the weekend, and I'm doing
good plug on that.
UFC preview with the DFS Bachelor, Kyle.
Erik, buddy, thank you so much. So much going on. Let's go watch some of these games and some of our action here. Good luck to you this weekend, and I'll be talking to you again a lot over the next few days.
Sounds good. Talk soon, dude.
Make sure to give Erik a follow. Thanks so much for hanging out with us, folks. And if you want more up-to-date information on NFL Sunday, 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern time, Sunday morning at BTV Bets.